everyone. Welcome to Achieving Success with Olivia Akin. I am your host, Olivia Akin. Each week, we will discuss the roadmap of achieving your personal and professional success. We give you real-life stories on growing personally and professionally to achieve your life and career goals with the help of some top-notch guests. Today, we are speaking with Oakland McCulloch. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCulloch is a decorated leader and expert in leadership development. Oakland is the author of the 2021 book, Your Leadership Legacy, Becoming the Leader You Were Meant to Be, which distills lessons from his distinguished 23-year career in the U.S. Army and nearly 2 decades of leadership in civilian roles. Known for his practical and actionable insights, Oakland has delivered keynote speeches around the world, inspiring leaders to create meaningful change and leave a lasting impact. You can find Oakland on LinkedIn by searching Oakland McCulloch or by email at ltcoakmcculloch@gmail.com or by going to his website, ltcoakmcculloch.com. Hello, Oakland. It's fantastic having you on the show today.
Yeah, I've really been looking forward to it, Olivia.
I'm excited, and we've talked about you coming on for a while, so I want to dive in because there's so many aspects of the trajectory of your career, not just in the Army, but also in civilian life, and those parallels but differences as well. So let's dive in. To start off the show, can you tell me what success means and looks like to Oakland McCulloch?
Yeah, so I think success, I'm one of those that believes success changes as you move through life, because life is a journey. And so, you know, what you define as success as a young man or a young woman may change as you go along, as you get married, as you have a family, as things happen in your job. For me, success is helping other people become as successful as possible. That's been my goal all through my career in the Army, through my career in my civilian world, and it all relates back to my belief in servant leadership. So to me, I'm successful if I help other people be successful and we accomplish what we're supposed to accomplish in whatever job I have at that point.
And it also highlights being a servant leader and servant leadership, and the fact that when you serve others, you're also serving yourself in the same note by leading with service. And that being said, Oakland, your military career spanned 2 decades and was filled with leadership experiences at different ranks as well. Can you share a defining moment from your time in the military that had a lasting impact on your leadership approach, and how did you navigate it as you went through the ranks?
Right. I was a senior first lieutenant, about to make captain, but I was a senior first lieutenant, and I was on a staff. I was writing operations orders, plans for things coming up, everything from everyday things that we were doing to field problems, whatever. That was my job, was to write the operations order. And I had a major that I was working for who was not married and who believed that if he was in the office, you had to be in the office. Didn't care if you didn't have anything to do. If he was in the office, you were going to be in the office. And none of us liked him and liked that, especially my wife, who I was in there 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night when I could have been home. But that was his rule, and so we all followed it. He left, and a new major came in. And the very first day, I'm sitting there at 5 o'clock and I'm working on an order that isn't due for another 3 weeks because I'm just trying to stay busy. And he walks up to my office and he sticks his head around the corner and he says, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, sir, I'm working on this operations order." And he said, "Is it due tomorrow?" And I said, "No, sir." He said, "Then go home." Mm-hmm. And then when I took over my position as an S3, many years later as a major, the first thing I did when I took over that position was I called all the people in together and I said, "Look, there are going to be times when I need you here at 8 o'clock at night, but if I do, I will tell you. Otherwise, go home at 5 o'clock and do whatever it is you do at home. And I don't want to know what that is, but you don't need to be doing it here.
I remember a story my boyfriend told me. There were 2 units he served at, and it was similar and they were back-to-back units. So it got into a space of like, that was just the rhythm where it's like, you're walking in the door 6, 7 a.m., you're leaving 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. And it became a norm in the environment, but it also wore so many people down. Absolutely. Mentally, emotionally, clarity wise as well. Yeah. And then he got someone new in, and like the time they were supposed to leave was when they weren't out was 2 o'clock. And so the very first day that person came in, he's leaving at 2 o'clock. He's like, why aren't you getting up? Like, we're done. He's like, oh, like, don't I have to stay? And he's like, no. And one of the things that person instilled in him and like brought it up to everyone to make it a pattern and a habit was he'd go around at 2:30 and be like, okay, let's walk out together, right? And kind of like force the hand to have that. And performance went up. The mentality, the morale, everything improved. And to your point, when my boyfriend came to the unit he's currently serving at as a chief, he was like, okay, the guys would be like, no, we could keep working on this. We'll get it done. And he said the same thing. There's times things are going to pop up. We have to have emergency calls. We have to do this and that. And there's times where it can wait till tomorrow. And he'll tell everyone, okay, you don't have to come in on the weekend. We're good. It can wait till Monday.
Yeah, but it really does make a difference, not only in the work environment, but in the home environment, which let's be honest, if you're not happy at home, or if your spouse or significant other is not happy at home, you're not going to be happy at home, and it's going to affect your work environment. And he did the same thing. He walked around and he made a point at 5 o'clock, unless he needed you there, you were going home, and he followed the last person out the door.
And I think it's something of just like setting the tone and setting the standard as well, to be like, this is what's normal in some capacity, right? And normal can be interpreted differently to each person, but this is like what it should be like, and look at all the benefits and really taking that into account when we create our own habits. But then to your point too, when we all become in the position of leadership, to take all that into consideration and lead by example like they do. And like you do.
That's right. It's so important, because the culture of that organization is just a shadow of the leader. So whatever that leader does or allows to happen is going to become the culture of that organization. And so you have to make a conscious decision, because you are being watched all the time. All the time. So you have to set those standards that you expect people to meet. And if you do it well, the organization will benefit.
And for you, what was it like climbing up the ranks and being put in these different positions and getting also as high as you did before becoming a civilian? And as you were growing as a leader, as a rank level, go, okay, I have to kind of, I don't want to say like act a certain way, but there's obviously differentials in when you're at certain levels and who you interact with, how you interact with them. How was it for you transitioning as an individual and as a leader at the same time in that process?
Yeah, so I don't, my philosophy is I don't care how high up you get, you still need to get to know the people that you have direct control over. And so I did that. Now you got to keep the leader-led relationship. I got that. But that doesn't mean that you don't get to know them and be able to ask them questions. I was lucky in my last assignment in the Army, the last 16 years, 3 years on active duty and 13 as a Department of the Army civilian working for the Army. I had my hand in commissioning over 600 lieutenants for the Army. And I used to tell them all the time, look, your goal should be every day to go out and find one person in your organization and find out something new about that person, about their personal life, not just about work, but what's their spouse's name? What's their kid's name? What sports do their kids play? Get to know them and let them get to know you a little bit, because leadership is about people and trust, and people will not trust you if they don't get to know you. That's just human nature. So you've got to still have that personal relationship. I don't care how high up you get. Obviously, like I said, you got to keep that leader-led relationship to that point, but that doesn't prevent you from getting to know people and letting them get to know you.
And to your point, like you just said, it builds a level of trust and a level of understanding and a level of being seen and heard, that when you're not touching base on the personal aspects of their life, you're not making the point to learn something new about them and being able to follow up with that, you just don't have that feeling. And then they might not be as transparent enough, or as they should be, or at all, when it comes to really important things that are happening in their life that might be affecting their work or their team. And especially in, military sectors, first responders, whatever it might be, there's a lot of high pressure cooker situations where if you're not on your A game, it might not just affect your role, it might affect everyone and the outcome. So that's for right. You, how did you handle when you weren't having the best days, or that transparency from leadership down to be like, I want to know these things, and this way we can build as a team, but also if you can't show up because XYZ, as you mentioned, something might be going on in the home side of things, whatever it might be, you might not be able to show up and be as present in what we're doing today.
Yeah, so I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt, to a point. If somebody was coming into me every single day saying, hey, I got something at home, I got to leave. Okay, at some point we got to figure out what that problem is and let's fix it. But, if one of my soldiers came in, or one of my civilian workers that I was in charge of later on after I retired came in and said, hey, I got an issue I got to take care of. I said, okay, go take care of it. Mm-hmm. Because if they don't take care of it, they're not of any use to you there in the office, because that's what they're going to be worried about. And the one of the key points about getting to know people, because I see this all the time when I go around to companies and talk to them and help coach them a little bit. I see leaders who don't know their people, who assign somebody a job or a task or a project that isn't even, that they know that if they knew them, they would know that that's not a good fit for them. But the person sitting right next to them might be the perfect person for that project, and they just don't know it because they don't take the time to get to know people. And it's not that hard. Get out of your office, walk around, talk to people. I had a boss who retired a 3-star general, and he was a good mentor of mine. And one day he told me, he said, Oak, I don't care how high up in the organization you get, never, ever, ever turn down a chance to go get your own cup of coffee. He said 2 things happen when you do that. One, you show everybody in your organization that you're no better than they are. You got to go get your own cup of coffee just like they do. And number 2, if you're lucky, you got 2 or 3 different ways you get from your office to the coffee pot, and you and back to your office, and you stop along the way and you talk to people. It's not that hard to do it. You just got to make an effort to do it.
And that's the thing. It's making the effort, but it's also as a entrepreneur myself and founder and CEO of my business, and it being more of a solo company, and then I bring my team in, and it's not like I go into an office or my team comes into an office and we sit together and we could do this. It's a lot of remote work. And my friends, we'll be out and I get a call or I get a text and they'll be like, what are you doing? It's a Friday. And I'm like, or, Friday night or the weekend. And I'm like, yeah, one of my people had a win personally, or this or that. I just want to touch base. I just remembered this. And they're like, how, why? Like, why are you doing these monthly texts or reach out to people that you met, you only talk to a handful of years or this and that? And I'm like, because it's all relationship building.
That's right.
It's all knowing that no matter the situation or the distance, you'll show up. And it's not just for the easy moments. It's okay, well, I know I can lean on you and you have my back in the hard moments, and I can trust that.
Yes.
And it isn't that what's going to happen scenario. And I love the coffee example because it's the age-old water cooler as well.
Yeah.
And it's like, so much can be said around the water cooler, but if you never get up from your desk to go to the cooler, you're missing a lot of conversations that will make working together and the unity of a team way better.
Yeah, I agree. And simple things, I when I was in the field, a lot of times I would grab an MRE and I'd go pick a tank or a Bradley, and I'd just go sit on there on the top of it, eating lunch with whoever the crew was, and just talk. How's everything going? Just ask them simple questions, and you'd be amazed at what the answers are. And I always tell people, here's the difference. If you sit in your office and call somebody in your office, you will get an entirely different answer to your question than if you went out where they are and asked them that question. Because when you call them to your office, it's like they're going to the principal's office. They think they might be in trouble, whatever. But if you're out there where they are in their environment and you made the effort to come sit with them and stand around and talk to them, you're going to get a lot more honest answers from them. And they'll open up a little bit better.
I 100% agree. And I recently had a conversation with an individual, and they own a podcasting company, a production company, and we're going back and forth. And she's like, hey, can you sit in on this meeting? I might want to implement this system, looking to buy it, but I really want your perspective on the call. It was like, yeah, no problem. She's like, can you do Monday? And typically the answer would be yes. Obviously, it's a work day. But there was a morale day happening for my boyfriend's unit. And I was like, you know what? There's an event happening. I'm going to go to that. So I'm taking after this time off. So I can't do the call. We got to do it later in the week. She's like, come on, it's Monday. And I'm like, nope, it's important. And she's like, but it's their day. It's not, you're not part of their team. And I go, actually, as the spouse, I am part of their team.
Absolutely.
And I was like, and I'm the support, right? As again, going back to rank and everything, there's a rank that occurs, and certain levels of conversation or in-depthness or, that level that always gets taken into consideration, whether you're in military or civilian life, whether you're in corporate or small business, there's always that level. But coming in, I could go up to one of the guys and start going, how is it being far away from your girlfriend right now? She's coming to visit. Are we looking forward to this? And get that level where as a spouse and just building a friendship with them, being like, hey, if you guys need anything, while this is going on, just like, I'm here. I got you. It becomes, again, more of that unit. But a lot of times people forget that the spouses, even though they might not be going into the action or, privy to certain things, they are part of those teams.
Absolutely. It's teamwork, no doubt about it. I mean, my wife and I worked together in lots of capacities during my career, both in the military and in the civilian world. And, not only did it just was she just supporting me, but she was supporting other people in the organization, and they could tell. I mean, you can tell when you've got when somebody has the support of their significant other, and when they don't. And again, If they don't, then it usually affects their work one way or another.
And that being said, leadership in the military often is a support of the family at home and the individuals who are serving. But it also often requires making decisions under intense pressure, under uncertainty, and only being able to make decisions with information that is in front of you at that time. How do you translate those high stakes leadership lessons into practical advice for civilian leaders and organizations facing their own unique challenges, especially in today's environment?
Right. Well, you hit it right on the head. And when I find people in organizations that aren't making good decisions or timely decisions, one of the things I always ask them is why. And the answer I always get is, well, I didn't have enough information. Well, I'm here to tell you that world where you've got all the information you want to make a decision, that place is called fantasy land. That doesn't exist. I don't care what profession you work in. You're always going to have information you don't know. I always tell them, figure out what you know, make a good guess at what you don't know, and then make a decision. You can always change it as you go down the road, as you get more information available. The other thing I always tell them is push the decision making for most things as far down as you feel comfortable doing that. Let the people who are on the ground doing things make the decisions. Now, they need to let you know, and if it's something that is life altering or could really affect your organization, then they probably need to ask permission. But for the most part, let them make the decisions down there. Use their skills, their knowledge, their abilities, not just your own. And I think you'll find that they're on the ground. They know what's going on. So they won't usually make good decisions. And the third thing I always tell people is that as the leader, once you've got the people in your organization where they can make decisions like that and a crisis comes up, once you've got them handling the crisis, take a step back and look big picture. What else are we forgetting? What else could happen that's going to influence this situation, whether it's military first responder where it's life or death, or if it's in business where it's just the success of the business. Take that step back and look at the big picture and figure out what's coming down the road. Because as a leader, that's your job.
Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing that people typically don't do, you see it in the medical field with the M&As after an issue arises with a case that's severe and evaluating it, seeing if there was other routes, problem solving. That doesn't always happen in a day-to-day situation in other sectors, whether it's business, whatever it might be. And I think it's a big misstep because there's so much, to your point. You need to have that bird's eye view. You need to be able to figure out the decision, obviously in real time, like we were talking about, and be like, okay, this is the path forward. But if something did not have the end result you wanted, the question is why? Instead of just like going, okay, this is what it was or must have been. That's what I hear a lot. It must have been this. Okay, but was it that?
Yes, I know it. Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of reflection. I had somebody tell me one time, I learned a lot from that experience. And I said, you didn't learn anything from that experience because experience is full of emotions and you don't learn from emotions. I said, you learned from reflecting on that experience. And I'm a huge believer in reflection, both big events and then daily. I'm anytime there's a big event, you look at it and say, okay, what were we supposed to do? What did we do? How could we get better? And even if you were successful, that doesn't mean you couldn't get better because we always can. But then I am a firm believer that you got to add it to your personal life as well. The last thing I do before I go to bed, I'm a creature of habit. Routines, and I'm a believer in routines of routines. So I try to do things the same way, not only the same way, but in the same place and all that as much as possible. And I start my day every day the same way. I listen to the daily mass. I read a couple of chapters in the Bible, and I say my daily prayer. now I'm set. I don't have a whole lot of control what happens after that, but at least I started right. And then at the end of the day, every day, I read something, whether it's an article, a blog, a couple pages in the book I'm reading, whatever it is, I try to read something. I write in my journal because I've kept a journal for 52 years, and I write in it every day. And then the last thing I do before I go to bed is I reflect on my personal day. What was I supposed to do? What did I do? And how could I get better at it tomorrow? Because your goal should be to be a little bit better every day.
And it's also that those moments in those uncertainty can be the biggest moments of growth. How do you deal with it? And it's also having a supply chain background myself and just who I am naturally. It's always asking, okay, well, what if it doesn't go that way? What are we going to do instead when we're planning anything? And I'm a big believer when it comes to building things out, a process and procedure.
Yes.
And one thing I was told when I was younger, and it stuck with me from someone I'm close friends with and has kind of been a mentor over the years, and a part of my family, is like, piss poor planning leads to piss poor performance. And always keep that in mind. And I was like, oh, it's so easy to remember that importance. And when you're rolling anything out, in my case, off a service I might provide someone, everyone goes, oh, you signed that first client. Like, how are you going to do it now? Like, what do you know, like what the buffers might be? And I go, there's not going to be buffers. They're like, how do you know that? And I go, because I spent a month before I even like put this out that we're going to do this, planning every step, every procedure, and going, okay, if this happens, this is how we handle it. If, this is how you walk through the process to get that outcome. But all of that is game plan, game planning, game play. And it's looking at things and going, okay, what are all the outcomes could be? And I think it's a big misstep that people forget to do or don't think is important. It's like, let's just get in the thick of it. We'll solve this, or, well, now we're here. And I'm like, no, don't have that approach.
No, absolutely not. The term I always use, and I've used it since I was a lieutenant, I always used to tell people, you can come up with the best plan in the world, the enemy still has a say. And the enemy, you could be in the Army. Obviously, we know what the enemy is there. It's the people you're fighting against. But in the civilian world, in a business world, you have enemies. You have time, you have money, you have resources, you have mistakes that can be made. Whatever the enemy is, you can define it however you want. But the enemy always has a say. And if you haven't gone through that process of, okay, this is the plan, but this is plan B if that happens. And if this happens, then we're going to do this. You war game it out so that you look at, as much as you can, all the things that could happen so that you're prepared for those things. And that's kind of like taking that step back, just looking, okay, what are all the bad things that could happen? And let's figure out what we need to do if it does.
And going off that too, I remember when I was starting my second business, which is an apparel company for the U.S. Coast Guard, and for people to buy shirts to represent the Coast Guard. And I built out this timetable of like, okay, here's the plan between today's date and when we're going to launch, and what's everything we have to do, and what will it look like when we get down to like a day-by-day process. And we were within a 2-week time span of when I wanted to launch the business. And I get a call and they were like, listen, this is where we're at with some of this design work. We're not going to be able to deliver it in time. And, they start that conversation. And I was like, okay, well, this was the timetable we discussed, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, yeah, it's just not going to be feasible with the tools they had and the time they had. And I was like, I get off that conversation and I'm like, okay. And I was like, just get this and this done. Can you just try to get this and this done? And they're like, yes, that should be doable. I immediately pick up the phone, and my boyfriend was with me at the time. He heard the conversation. I hang up, and he's expecting me to be like, oh my God, I've been planning this. Like, right? Like, how could this have gone wrong? And like, give me 1 minute. And like, we kind of walked through it, and we leave and we're driving somewhere, and I start picking up the phone and making a call. He's like, okay, she's making a phone call. I call up another designer I know, and I'm like, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is where this stands. I need XYZ done because it's not getting done here. Can you deliver? And I could give you a final answer by today if I need this work done. But if I do, can you deliver this? He's like, yeah. And I get off, and my boyfriend was like, A, I didn't even know you had someone else. B, like the fact you have that clarity to like start taking and have that conversation now instead of waiting hours to then be like, let's do this and that. Because like I wasn't expecting that to happen. And I was just like, you can live in that mindset of like, okay, things are not going the way you want for a few minutes, right? But you have to be able to pivot quickly. And if you're building relationships continuously, if you're nurturing those relationships continuously, you'll know the people you can call that can potentially deliver, and in real time have that clarity to go, oh, I know someone that I can lean on for support during this. Let's get the ball rolling. And then it eliminates that real-time game plan navigation and like hiccup with, if we had waited and it wasn't delivered, we wouldn't have been able to launch. And then you're not launching, you're not making revenue, you're spending money. There's so many other things that could have happened when you don't plan accurately.
Yeah, and it just comes down to having options, for whatever it is that you're doing. And look, like you said, and like we discussed, just looking at all the things that could go wrong and what are you going to do? So then you don't have to make decisions while you're panicking. The decision's already been made. You might still be in a little bit of a panic mode, but at least you know who you're going to call, you know who you're going to talk to, you know what you want to do, and it's already planned out. You just got to pivot onto that branch or that sequel of whatever it is that you're doing.
Is also eliminating what I call the panic decisions.
Mm-hmm.
That whether you get in the thick of it, you don't know how to turn. Some people have panic buys, right? That last minute shopper that like, oh, I only got X amount of time, I just got to buy it. Business, it's those panic decisions of like, okay, let's just make the decision, move forward. But to your point, there's not the clarity. And when you have that clarity, it's no longer a panic decision. And, that being said, you often speak about the importance of inspiring the next generation of leaders, of individuals. In your experience, what are some of the key differences in how the younger leaders have been approaching leadership today compared to previous generations? And how do you adapt your message to bridge that gap when there might be younger leaders and more experienced leaders in the room?
Yeah, so I when I talk to leaders, especially like you said, if there's the wide gap between brand new leaders and senior leaders, and that happens sometimes. It just happened. I just got back from San Antonio, and there were 21-year-olds in the audience, and there were people who had been in their profession for 50 years. So I try to help not only the young people understand what they got to do, but the older people, how they have to deal with the younger generation, because they are different. And I'm not saying it's bad, or every generation's a little bit different. And so one of the things, when I was a lieutenant 40 years ago, if one of my bosses, one of my leaders told me to do something, unless it was immoral, illegal, or unlawful, I never asked the question why. I just did what I was told to do. These young people today, they want to know why. And there's nothing wrong with that. It took a couple of years for me to figure out there was nothing wrong with 18-year-old asking me why, but there isn't anything wrong with that. What I've found is if you can convince them of the why, you've got them. They'll do whatever you ask them to do, but they want to know why. And of course, they use different tools than we used as leaders. They text messages instead of face to face or even phone calls. They text, they email. They use Zoom meetings a lot better than we did or do, unless it's something that you do on a daily basis. So you got to be willing to adapt to whatever the new technology is that the younger generation wants to use. Mm-hmm. And then the thing that I try to instill in young leaders is use the experience, knowledge, and ability of the people that you have the privilege to lead. And that came from, I was a 24-year-old lieutenant and brand new platoon leader. And the first day I went there, took over my platoon, the platoon sergeant, still remember him like he was yesterday, Sergeant First Class Pinson, about 6'6", 250-pound country boy from Mississippi. And he grabbed me by the shoulder and said, "Let's go have lunch, Lieutenant." We went over, sat down underneath a tree, ate an MRE, and he said, "Sir, you're in charge. We'll do things however you want to do it." He said, "However, I've been in the Army for 23 years. He'd been in the Army almost as long as I had been alive. "Why would you not listen to somebody like that?" And he said to me, "If you're going to screw up, I'm going to let you know." He said, "If you still want to do it that way, we'll do it that way because you're the boss." He said, "But I'm going to let you know. That's my job." And I give him a lot of credit for helping to produce the leader that I became. And so I try to instill that in young leaders' mind, that you got to be willing to put your ego aside. Yeah, you're the boss, but you got to put your ego aside and allow people who have more experience than you and whatever it is you're doing to at least give you the ideas that they've got. Because if you don't, you're going to make mistakes, I promise you.
And it's also about having the conversation. I've recently, I sit on a nonprofit board and I lead that board. And again, there's a very big age gap between me and the next youngest person. And most of my board have been a part of this organization for, like you're saying, almost, if not longer than I've been alive. And they've seen the transitions. They've seen what's worked. They've had to push through some of the struggles that, even though times might change, the fundamental issue or what's happening is just the ebbs and flows of the organization. And so someone was asking me, like, why aren't I, as a leader, like hands-on, attending every meeting that they're having, whether, as a VP, like if they have a planning meeting with their committee, why aren't I at every one of those planning meetings? And I said, I trust my team. And I understand that person as the leader might have way more experience on how to handle whatever's going on and plan than me, even though I'm the, higher ranking in this. And when we have our board meetings, I might bring the perspective to the table of like, have we thought about this? Have we done this? But it's understanding that just because you hold a title does not mean you have all the answers or all the experience.
That's right.
And it's really important to identify that and identify the value that people bring to the table. Even, again, we could reverse model it, right? The individuals that have been part of the organization for example, 10, 15 years, you walk in the door in this management role and you might be 25 years old, 30 years old, and the people reporting to you have been doing it for 15 years. You have to they also have to understand that it can be an aspect of, because you're younger, you have a different perspective, a different way to leverage the tools that they might have not been doing. But understand that both sides need to come to the table and have the back and forth conversation and build the trust, like we were talking about earlier as well.
Absolutely. That is key, that you got to trust the people, because trust is not just I think everybody understands that trust, a huge part of trust, and in my opinion, the most important part of trust is that the people you lead have to trust you. But it's a 360-degree circle, because then you have to trust the people that you're leading, that they're going to make good decisions and stay within the culture and within the guidelines you give them. And then everybody on the team has to trust each other, that they're going to do the right thing and do their job. And then when you take it to the business world or any organization, now it's the people outside your organization that you're doing the service for, that they have to trust you and you have to trust them. Because if they don't trust you, they're not going to do business with you. And if you don't trust them, I hope you don't do business with them. So it really is that 360-degree trust. And if any part of that circle is broken, you got problems.
Oakland, how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, so like we got connected on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit, and that's where I do most of my business communication. But I've also got my website, and on my website has my cell phone number, my email address. It has links to all the social media that I'm on, not just LinkedIn. And would love to. I always love to hop on a Zoom call like we did, and just get to know people. Because again, networking is a huge part of not just business but life. At least it should be.
I 100% agree with you on that sentiment. And thank you, Oakland, for all of your insight today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on this show, Olivia. It was a pleasure.
I really enjoyed the conversation, and a few of those key takeaways from today's conversation include: it doesn't matter how high up you are, you need to get to know your team, as well as every day. And this is a challenge I'm actually going to give everyone. Every day, find out one new thing to build a personal relationship, either with your team and in a professional setting, and or in a personal setting with maybe your neighbors, just the people around you. So every day, try to learn one new thing about someone, as well as never turn down an opportunity, as well as figure out what you know, what you might not know, and make a decision. You have to make the decision and stand by that decision, as well as you can have the best plan in the world, but the enemy always has a say. That was one of my favorites. That is definitely going to stick with me because it is so true. Whether the enemy is someone you're fighting in a combat zone, for example, like Oakland mentioned, or just that enemy of you're in a setting and you don't know what the other outcome could be or whatever it might be. There's always that enemy. This was a great episode with our top-notch guest, Oakland McCulloch. Thank you for listening and have a successful day.